Now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today is February the 24th. I'm Donna Will, Professional Development Coordinator for the Developmental Disabilities Administration, and we welcome you to the webinar on Person-Centered Planning, Service Considerations, and Flexibilities. On the panel today, we have Bernie Simons, Deputy Secretary for DDA, Rhonda Workman, Director of Federal Programs and Integrity, Linda Yale, Western Maryland Regional Office Deputy Director, Rachel White, Eastern Shore Regional Office Deputy Director, and we also have Karen Lee from SEEK. She's the Executive Director there, and we have Jennifer Metrick. She's from Penmar. She's the Chief Strategy Officer. We also have Jane Redar from MMMARS, and she is the Senior Coordinator of Community Services. And we also have Patricia Sestoki, Director of DDA Program Services. So before we begin, I'd like to go over a few things about the webinar. Everyone's in listen-only mode. There are two options to listen to the webinar, by computer and phone. And if you look on the panel interface on your right, labeled audio, you can click either computer or phone to get the best option for listening. We have one handout, but it's in PDF and PowerPoint. So there's actually two. It looks like we have two handouts, but it's basically the same one. We are recording the session, and it'll be posted on the DDA website and YouTube. And questions are, you can ask those in the question box or chat box, and we'll be getting to those towards the end of the presentation. So now I'd like to introduce Rhonda Workman. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Donna. Thank you so much. Can you go to the next slide?
Sure.
So thank you for joining us today. We've got great participation. We're really getting, we've got over 900 people on the call today, so we're really excited about that. My name is Rhonda Workman, and I am the DDA Director of Federal Programs and Integrity. Our agenda for today's discussion is going to include purpose for why we're meeting today. We're going to talk about the trajectory and person-centered planning. We're going to provide some examples of day in the life related to various services for meaningful day, employment, and such. We're going to also touch on service considerations and flexibilities. We are also going to hear from our early adopters, from Karen and Jennifer, who's going to share some really helpful and insightful information about their experiences and strategies they use within their agency. We're also excited to have Jane join us today as a coordinator of community services to really speak to other coordinators in terms of roles and responsibilities and strategies that she uses. And then we'll get to some questions. Next slide, please. So today's training and discussion gives us another opportunity to share and discuss how to operationalize the various flexible services and strategies that are available to people and CCS and providers as they look to help create individualized person-centered plans. As I mentioned, you'll hear from Karen and Jennifer, including their internal infrastructural changes that they've made related to person-centered planning, and some important reminders from Jane on this too. Our purpose is to ensure comprehensive, flexible, person-centered plans, to share those provider business models and information or infrastructural changes, to support provider transitions to fee-for-service billing, to review person-centered processes and share those service flexibility reminders, and to share those strategies and lessons learned from some of our early adopters and coordinators of community services. We are also conducting a follow-up webinar on March 4th, so that's next Friday, from 12 to 1:30, where we will review residential service support hours, behavior supports, respite, state-funded services, and we will also hear more from Jane, Karen, and Jennifer. So today's presentation is really focused on supporting and speaking to coordinators of community services and our providers. And we appreciate you taking the time to join us today, and we value your time. We know everyone is extremely busy, but we hope that you will be able to close your emails, move away from distractions, so you can actively listen and share questions in the chat box. Next slide, please.
People are the center of planning a vision for their personally defined good life. This is done through person-centered planning. As per our community of practice, before considering services, it is important for coordinators of community services and providers working in partnerships with the person and their team members to engage in pre-planning and team meetings, to share updates, progress toward outcomes, current or new needs, challenges, and risk. As noted in our PCP development and authorization guidance and webinars, there are several person-centered planning tools and strategies that may be used in helping each participant to consider their personal strengths, assets, gifts, and wishes across the life domains and over the lifespan. Person-centered planning is a continual process of listening and learning to create a meaningful and relevant plan that may be adjusted according to life circumstances. This includes discovery actions, sorry, I lost my place, such as discussing focus areas as identified by the participant and included in the PCP, as well as outcomes the participant wants to accomplish initially and throughout the PCP year. After the participant's vision has been identified, the PCP team should utilize the HRST and other tools and discussions to assess support needs, including any that have changed or have not been met, and identify healthcare needs, risks, and mitigation strategies. To support an integrated community life versus a service life, the PCP team should continuously explore generic, natural, community, local, and other resources to meet needs and address risk. Natural supports refer to the support and assistance that naturally flows from the associations and relationships typically developed in natural environments such as the family, school, work, and community. Generic services mean support and services available to any member of the population and is not specific to meeting specialized needs of individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities. The CCS will develop, in collaboration with the participant team, a PCP that reflects the participant's vision, the participant's outcomes, risks, rights, restrictions, and needs, services necessary to ensure the participant is safe and achieving the good life. Next slide, please.
Good afternoon. This is Jane Rada. I've been with Mars for over 7 years. Thank you for the opportunity to join in you all in today's webinar. As one of the CCS, I've worked closely with SEEK in their transitioning to the Feed for Service LTSS Maryland DDA module, and I'm here to share with you some critical aspects of case management that are highly important to a successful creation of a person-centered plan. One of many CCS's responsibility is to make time to schedule and to conduct the pre-planning team meeting and learn how do you work with the person's team in understanding the person's vision, outcome, risk, and together develop the trajectory to the person's good life. One of my major roles in facilitating this process was to learn and to explore the person's interest of activities of daily living with the team. We also discuss with the person about their vision of what they want their activity of daily schedule to look like. We look into his or her accomplishment and what they would want to achieve in life. For example, the person is trying to be financially dependent. To achieve this goal is to have and to maintain a paid job. With the support of the team, we also looked at his or her internal and external support system and develop objectives that would enable the person to achieve their goals and increase their dependency. I highly recommend that you track the PCP anniversary date /APD of people on your caseload so that you can proactively plan and schedule all the meetings in a timely manner and get the PCP submitted within 20 days to the DDA for their approval. One of the items that has been very helpful is to start developing the PCP 60 days or more prior to the end date of the AP day so that it can be approved and implemented on time. It's also critical to make sure that if you don't have the 60 days meeting due to a change of agency or CCS, to think about how you will prioritize to ensure that the PCP can be completed as soon as possible. Next slide.
Hi, this is Karen Lee. Thanks so much for having us today. This is an incredibly exciting time for me. I've been with SEEK for 32 years, and yes, that's a very long time. And I know that it's been the intent in our industry to be person-centered for decades. We've been talking about it for a long time. But it's not really until you plan, schedule, and budget by the person, and then create an infrastructure as a provider that can support those practices that you really can truly become person-directed. SEEK's transition into the LTSS system and the new service definitions has significantly moved us closer to that goal of being truly person-centered. The next slide has some strategies that SEEK and PENMAR and our EAG partners, early adopter group partners, have planned. We've made tons of mistakes and we have stumbled through them. But we all agree that when you start your pre-planning early, you base it on what people really want their lives to look like, and you make sure the PCPs are comprehensive and they can work throughout the whole year. Be really intentional, because what the PCP says really does matter. Your systems must be built to operate using person-centered practices. Jen, you want to add on to that?
Sure, Karen. Hi, everyone. This is Jennifer Metrick from PENMAR Human Services. I'm very excited to be here with you today. We certainly put a lot of pre-planning attention into how to transition into this new fee-for-service model. And it really gave us an opportunity for the first time to really bring our services and our finance teams and our IT teams together to figure out how we were going to transition smoothly. So I would definitely encourage all of the providers to think through bringing together those different parts of your agency, mapping out your processes and what this is going to potentially look like as you move into LTSS. Certainly understanding the new services, how they work, how you can maximize them, especially within the meaningful day services, is very important to be able to design that process that's going to work well for your organization. We have learned a lot, and as Karen mentioned, we are constantly working to tweak things and change things to have that balance between really great person-centered planning and then how do we actually deliver on that in a way that's financially stable. So there is a balance as you move into the fee-for-service system.
Next slide. Great. So I'm going to let you read this, and then you can also download it. These are just some of the many things that we as early adopters have struggled with and worked through. But as we go through this presentation today, don't just think about the words that we're saying or the actions we're saying, but think about the infrastructure you need to support this sort of transformation to this new way of doing services. we became very intentional at SEEK about implementing these strategies in the beginning, almost very didactic. It was very difficult, but then they became a part of our practice. The intentionality of these strategies is really critical in the beginning, but as you start to do them, as Jen said, you continue to learn, you make a mistake, you have something happen, you learn, you change your practice. And you have to be able to balance all of that in your infrastructure to be able to maintain your financial stability as an organization. Jen?
So one of the things where we started was certainly around understanding each of the different kinds of services and how they would work. So we took the billing and services guide that DDA had put together, and we made a Penmar specific services guide. And we also have two different main centers working out of our Maryland offices. And so we even have two different approaches that we're testing along the way. One of our sites is focused fully on community-based services, and the other site has a mixture of both day program and community-based services. So we really wanted to make sure that we were providing a clear picture for all of our team members on what this was going to look like. And this tool enabled us to do our training with our managers and our coordinators and our DSPs, because that has been a really critical piece in making sure that we're actually able to implement well in the system. One of the things on the slide that you'll see is around online platforms. It's important that DSPs are able to connect with these services and be able to easily be able to know what services they're providing when, how to collect billing information on those, and document appropriately, because it is a different way for them to be focused compared to how they might have been doing meaningful day services in PCIS 2. So making it as easy for DSPs as possible, I would highly recommend. And some of the online platforms that are available out there really are tools that can ensure that happens. Next slide.
So this is, Jen talked about the service booklet that they have at Penmar, and SEEK started off also with a big service booklet. You know, we took the DDA one and then made it a little bit smaller, just with the services that we're providing. But then what we did is we put it into a one-page graphic. We have some great creative artists at SEEK, and they made this very visual. Our theme at SEEK is we help people to live, work, and thrive. And so you can see here, when in the living category, we do personal supports and supported living. In the thriving, we do assistive technology, behavior, nursing, and CDS. And in the work, here are the other services. And just so people could get a quick view of this, we use this with families, with people we support. Obviously, you can see it's as in plain language as possible. And we want to make sure that people, and we also add virtual supports to all of this as well. We overlaid that. So just kind of a visual for everybody to know, DSPs, people you support, families, for everybody to know what they can buy from you. This is the menu of service basically for everybody. Next slide.
All right, so this is just one snippet of our large services guide. I am very jealous of Karen's visual, one-page visual. We'll have to get down to that place when we've solidified our full kind of menu of services, because we're still in the process of figuring that out. That's one thing I did want to note to everybody. Don't feel like you have to have all of this already put together as you're transitioning into LTSS, because you will learn as you go along what services and what parameters make sense and where you might need to tweak those. So this is just an example of the employment discovery service. So it provides all of the specifications that were in DDA's guidance. And then on the right, you can see some of the PENMAR specifications where we'll focus on how we might do things different for TYs as they're coming in and ensuring that everybody is offered employment discovery versus those that might be coming to us that have already been in service with us seeking employment, and how we're able to pull folks off of our wait list and get them into those important employment supports. Certainly with employment services, we know that there's specified positions that you'll need for those that have gone through a certain amount of training and have been able to pass the CESP exam, for example. Discovery milestones are outside of the 40 hours per week billable of meaningful day. And so we wanted to make sure that the folks that were involved in the PCP process really understood these specifications as they were working with their CCSs to put together plans that made sense for people. And then we also make sure for any service that we're able to offer, both in person and virtual, we made sure that was part of the services guide too. Because what we've learned through COVID is there's a lot of opportunities to provide both virtual and in-person supports. And so if we were looking at this a little bit differently and it was community development service instead of the employment discovery as is on the screen, I would be able to show you that we have certain parameters for CDS group or one-to-one that we've determined is going to make sense for how people schedule their days and also are financially stable. We want to make sure that we're designing services that we're able to continuously sustain. And so, for example, we provide CDS either in a full day, 6 to 7 hours, or we also can break it down in 3-hour blocks of time. So people could have a combination of, let's say, CDS for 3 hours, and then they also could be employed for half of the day, or they could have a mix of one-to-one CDS for specific activities and specific needs, but they could also have the opportunity to join CDS groups. So we wanted them to be in practical application of how we could provide those services. Next slide.
So this is just something that SEEK started off using. Again, we have some really incredible people that work at SEEK that we've brought along into being able to do things like this, so that it's not just all the executive leadership team, but it's really the buy-in across the whole organization. So I do want to follow up on something that Jen said. SEEK has landed on some of these documents and some of these tools and processes, but we really started at a different place. You know, we had like a 15-page document before we ended up with that one picture I just shared with you. We learned a lot, we tried, we failed, we retooled, we moved forward, and we really worked together. And it was really organizational transformation, no question about it. This is the PCP process we used to kick off our LTSS transition. It was really critical that we had this process built because you needed infrastructure around it. You can't just say, okay, team, go do this. You need to make sure they have the time, the resources, the skills, the training. And as Jen said, I think they're using the TWINSYS system and SEEK is using the ICM system. And then a system like that to be able to support. It's really great that we're using different systems and we're both working through them, and both of them have turned out to work for us individually really well. But when we realized how critical it was for the finances and the programs to be working together throughout this process, that was a real turning point for us. After we created this process and we used it for a bit, we started to tweak timelines. So now we actually do not start our PCP pre-planning on 60 days, we started on 90 days. And so 90 days beforehand, we start working with the person. we bring in the CCS. It generally, data-wise, we found that it is taking about 90 days to get a plan all the way from the idea of a pre-planning meeting all the way to signed. And if a plan needs to be adjusted, it's actually a bit longer. So get it right the first time. We continue to collect this data and analyze if we need to tweak it, but this is basically our process. You know, there's a pre-planning, a planning, the actual PCP review where it goes through all the phases, and then the implementation phase. Next slide. So this is much closer to where we are right now, which is 90, this OM on there, that's an operations manager for SEEK. And I also think that the SIP is not on here. That happens in this process, but we have this planning map, we train people on it. We make sure that you not only train people on the process, but you train them on each of the steps along the way. Again, remember, we have to bring in finance because can we fiscally afford to do this plan the way the person wants it? We may need to do some negotiating with the person because they may want something very different than they had in the past. This is just a kind of a flow chart of our services. So next slide. So this is really important tool that we have. There's a lot of documents that need to be handed over, and they need to be handed over in a timely manner. We turn in our PCP packet before the PCP even happens, so that when the goals, the one-page profile, we're a big user of the trajectory in that system, the DSAT, the SIP, all of these things, we want to make sure they're done before the meeting. That's a real change for us because prior to going into LTSS, that stuff was done. Oh, did you get that done? Oh, let's try to get the to them this time. Well, the timelines are really critical at this point, and it's really critical for CCSs that are on this call, and it's critical for providers, and the collaboration and the openness and the working together is so critical. Next slide.
Using a team approach, including detailed team discussions, is essential to identify the person's specific goals, needs, and wants. Given the person's trajectory and goals, it is important to keep in mind that LTSS service provides the person and family with greater service flexibility. Historically, a person could receive one meaningful day service daily as they were based on a daily unit. LTSS service billing provides the flexibility to receive multiple meaningful day services to support their goals and schedules in a single day. If teams need help with understanding how to braid waiver services to meet the needs of the person and allow for the provider to bill for the service when provided, please reach out to your regional office. Keep in mind that each person is unique and the DDA is not in-depthly aware of the person's specific team discussions, but can share information about the service flexibilities and options for the detailed service authorization section. As you explore and consider what a day would look like for the person, you may need to shift your thinking from a daily meaningful day service to a person's choice for multiple meaningful day activities and services. Some questions to consider include, what service options could they choose from on a daily and 15-minute basis? What other services may be needed during the year? Remember to consider outcomes the participant wants to accomplish initially and throughout the PCP year, and what services would be needed. And how is the person integrated in and supported for full access to the greater community? For participants still in school, it is important to consider services needed during times when school is not in session, such as winter, spring, and summer breaks. Next slide, please. As you may know, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS, Community Settings Final Rule Intent is to ensure that individuals receiving services and supports through Medicaid HCBS programs have full access to the benefits of community living and are able to receive services in the most integrated setting. As teams meet, it is also important to keep in mind the federal HCBS rule and consider the full array of service options available. To support an integrated person-centered community life versus a service life, the PCP team should continuously explore generic, natural, community, local, and other resources to meet needs and address risk. The Charting the Life course Integrated STAR is a useful tool for people and families and teams to consider an array of integrated supports to achieve the envisioned good life, including those that are publicly or privately funded and based on eligibility, community supports that are available to anyone, relationship-based supports, technology, and also take into account the assets and strengths of the individual and family. This tool is helpful to get a more comprehensive look at all the services and supports that may exist in a participant's life, not just eligibility-specific supports. After exploration of generic, natural, community, local, and other resources, the PCP team should determine if any remaining unmet support needed can only be met with a waiver or Medicaid service. The DDA-operated Medicaid waiver programs includes various flexible services to support full active participation and membership of one's community. Examples include, but are not limited to, meaningful day services, including community development services and day habilitation, personal supports, assistive technology and services, transportation, family and peer mentoring supports, housing support services, participant education, training, and advocacy supports. Next slide, please. This slide shows you an example of a PCP detailed service authorization section with multiple services to support community integration, including community development services, day habilitation, assistive technology and services, transportation, respite, and personal supports. To support service flexibility, some services are based on 15-minute units. Some have an upper pay limit like camp and transportation that can be reflected with an annual service cost and check marks in each month. Next slide, please. During the planning meeting, it's important to consider how does the person spend their day in creating a robust PCP with a variety of supports based on the person's wants and needs, and if the services will take place every day, on various days, weekly, etc. It's important to remember that some services are in 15-minute units, some monthly, like follow along, milestone and employment services discovery, and upper pay limits for respite camp. Remember that some services include transportation and nursing support services as a component of the services, like day habilitation and residential services. Once Meaningful Day Service is transitioned to LTSS Maryland, the Meaningful Day Transportation add-on will be ended as the rate includes a transportation cost component within it. Next slide, please.
So now we're going to get into some really good questions from our guest speakers. So thank you, Jane and Jennifer and Karen, for joining us. Really do appreciate it. So I think we have a question for Jane. Can you share how you work with the person's team in understanding the person's vision, outcomes, risks, and together develop the trajectory to the person's good life? And what was your main role in facilitating this process?
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Patricia. So for me, I'll say to understand the person's vision, outcome, risk, and together to develop this trajectory to the person's good life, it always starts with doing that ongoing monthly phone contact, quarterly visits, because during that time when you're checking in on the person on wellness check, you can know if there's changes into their life as far as, let's say if individual has like a fall risk or all of a sudden have a seizure, you know, those are things that you know for sure will be included in the risk section of their PCP. And by talking with the person and then having the pre-planned team meeting now to prepare for the PCP meeting, those things that you have learned, you can bring it into the table. And during the PCP pre-planning PCP meeting, there will be discussion of the person's interests and vision of what the person wants their activity of daily living schedule to look like. We can look at his or her accomplishment, what the person wants to achieve in life. Some might say, while I was in high school, now I'm transitioning to adult services. I want to continue to have my weekly lunch with some of my schoolmates and look into what services fit into what the individual wants. It's also important to consider other services and resources that are available to the person, like natural support, medical day services, CFC, RAM support providers, and so on. It's highly, highly important because I had a case once where an individual already had a medical day. I wasn't even, this was like a year within my CCS growth, where the person already has medical day services, but was also requesting day services with the provider. I think it was day habilitation. And it's important to make sure any of the state services does not lap with the DDA's funded services. So by talking as a team, those are all part of the pre-planning, where you can hear or suggest to them to say, hey, since you're having medical day services and they have starts from 9 to 3, are you interested in looking into respite services, personal support services, and then see how we can intertwine that so services does not overlap. You want to gain understanding of what the person currently has and then look into what DDA services they want to request in their PCP planning. And then create a schedule together as a team, see what the person need level is, and overall health. Because some people might want to request more staff support than the next. Let's say if someone has unpredictable seizure, they might want to request a one-to-one staffing support. So all of those things are part of the risk, the planning period. And then talk about what goals they want to work on to be more independent in the community. And goals can be travel training in the community, going out 2 or 3 times in the community of doing activities of what they want. That could include taking classes at Montgomery College or swimming or travel training, because a lot of people that we serve want to be as independent as possible. So just dig in and see what their vision is of their own life, of what they want to happen. Again, it's a person-centered plan. It's all about the individual, the person that we serve.
Thank you, Jane. That's very, very helpful. Really, I'm happy that you brought up, to really think about CFC and REM and overlapping of services. That's fantastic. Thank you for the work that you do. We really appreciate you. My next questions are for Karen and for Jennifer. And it's really, if you, I know you talked a little bit about it in the presentation, but can you share and discuss examples of how your agency went about creating multiple services to support the person's day in a life and community integration using the DDA service flexibilities, natural supports, community, all the things that you've done, and how you work with a person's team in the discovery process and planning to support the creation of a robust person-centered plan. So I turn it over to Karen, and maybe after Karen, Jennifer.
Thanks, Patricia. So I'm going to share in a little bit later some examples of how we've created these and actually share with you a schedule and kind of a prep on a DSAT of what it looks like. But you know, I'm going to say that it's a very different way of scheduling, of staffing, of training, and as a result, people have multiple people in their lives providing support. It's not like some of our legacy services that we've had in this field where they, you know, come to a day center and they're met by somebody, they spend the day with that person, maybe in a group or something, and they leave. It's a very different way of thinking about how to do services. And I think it was the intent of this fee-for-service system, as well as the DDA waiver definitions, to be able to move us in that direction. So I'm going to share them a little bit later. So Jen, do you want to go ahead and talk a little bit about how you've done some of that?
Sure, and I think you've mentioned this before. It's a very intentional process. And so we've really had to dig in more specifically into what the PCP process is, really utilizing many of the tools that also CCSs utilize as part of their planning. So we're having the same conversations and we're using the same language. So we utilize the Charting the Life course tools quite a bit in our, I would say, pre-planning process. So coming on to the 90 days before somebody's annual plan is due, we're starting those conversations early. We're looking at the person's goals that they had the prior year, what's worked, what hasn't. We're having those conversations around where do people naturally connect with their communities, both within service life and also outside of services with natural supports. Who are those natural supports? How frequently do they kind of connect with different places in the community? Where do they feel most comfortable? We also talk a lot about their outcomes. What are they trying to achieve that's going to create the best life for them? What's most important in that process? And then we look for the gaps where services and our menu of services, we can't provide all services, but we look for those gaps that the menu of Penmar services can then meet those needs and the aspirations of a person. And so it is a different process than, oh, you're going to be in rehabilitation, or you're going to be in CDS, or you're going to be in supported employment. Now we're having to look at a variety of different services to meet those needs and those desires of the person. And so for just a quick example, if somebody wants to interact mostly in their communities, they're not utilizing a day program, but they have a specific volunteer activity that they want to do. Well, maybe we don't have a group-based CDS group that's doing that volunteer activity. They already have a connection with that volunteer group, and so we'll try to build in one-to-one CDS supports for that person so that in that time frame they're able to do that for that specific purpose. But then at other times they might connect with CDS groups that are doing anything from employment exploration to social activities to advocacy, those kinds of things. So we try to marry what somebody wants and what they're trying to focus on for their good life, and then with our menu of services. Next slide.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful information. Thank you, Jennifer, Jane, and Karen. And now let's talk about employment.
As an employment-first state, DDA is committed to enhancing community employment options for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Under the employment-first approach, community integrated employment is the first option for employment services for youth and adults with disabilities, including people that have significant disabilities. The guiding principle of employment first is that all individuals who want to work can work and contribute to their community when given the opportunity, training, and support that build upon their unique talents, skills, and abilities. Everyone of working age and those supporting them should consider employment as a first option prior to any other service options. As fully participating members of their communities, Individuals with developmental disabilities will be afforded the opportunity to earn a living wage and engage in work that makes sense to them. DDA's new employment services includes a path for successful employment outcomes. Discovery milestones and job development assist individuals in making informed choices in designing their unique employment pathway and increasing independence, integration, inclusion, productivity, and self-determination. DDA's career exploration is another option. However, please note that this is a time-limited service and does not meet the competitive integrated employment standards. An employment goal is required within the PCP that outlines the trajectory and transition timeframe toward competitive integrated employment. DDA's employment services also include ongoing job supports and follow-along supports that should be noted in the PCP. Every participant interested in exploring employment opportunities should consider adding employment services, discovery, job development, and ongoing supports in their PCP within the plan year for a properly forecasted, and these would be only billed when each service is provided. This allows somebody to have a path and be able to create a plan for the whole year rather than having to revise their plan every time they needed a change in service. Next slide, please. This is an example of a PCP with detailed service authorization section with multiple employment services, including job development and employment discovery milestones requested within the person's plan year. Job development includes supports in finding a job and including customized employment and self-employment. Employment service discovery milestones 1, 2, and 3. It is a process to assist the participant in finding out who they are, what they want to do, and what they have to offer. Discovery includes 3 distinctive milestones. The best practice demonstrated that quality person-centered discovery milestones can typically be completed within 90 days. However, the completion of each milestone is flexible and will be considered in conjunction with the participant's unique circumstance. As noted on this slide, each month is checked for the discovery milestones so that whenever the person is ready to move to the next milestone, there does not have to be a revised PCP. They can go ahead and move on to that next milestone. This provides a lot of flexibility in an individual's plan. Next slide, please. Maryland is an employment-based state, so we expect that employment must be discussed during the discovery section of the PCP development. It's a mandatory field in the PCP. While we know that a person has a choice or may be of retirement age, we want employment to be the first option, not the only option. Community-based integrated employment is the first option for employment services for youth and adults with disabilities, including significant disabilities. So we want to move away from career exploration. Every participant interested in exploring employment opportunities should consider adding discovery, job development, and ongoing job supports in their PCP. Ongoing job supports and follow-along supports can be provided and billed within the same month. Career exploration requires an employment goal and is time limited for up to 720 hours. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Linda. Appreciate that. Now we have just want to share from the coordinator's perspective and the early adopter some employment questions. And so Jane, can you share how you started the employment conversation with the person and their team, and what supports you provided in the person-centered development related to the person's employment path?
Yes, sure. So as a coordinator, I usually start off by just first asking the person, are they even interested in working? Because again, it's a person-centered plan. It's all about them. Because sometimes most people either just want to volunteer once or twice a week, or just want to just do community activities of their choice versus working at all. So asking that question is important. You also want to ask them what are they interested in. Are they interested in working? And then ask he or she, are they interested in related to employment and completing the PCP employment focus area? So that on your PCP, the focus area for an employment, first of all, needs to be done for everybody, whether the person wants to work or not. But through those questions that are there, you get to gain knowledge of the person that you serve. For example, they have questions, are you interested in working? Do you think about, what do you think about having a job? Have you ever worked in the past? Do you have any financial needs? After identifying his or her needs, I work with the team to develop a realistic employment goal for the individual, for the person, and develop strategies. For example, if the person has never worked in the past before, I would encourage them to look into employment discovery, where it has that discovery 1, 2, and 3, and that would give them the opportunity and chance to explore things that they're interested on as far as work areas aspect. And the provider would be able to provide them these services once their PCP gets approved and start being implemented. So I think that's the number one question, is asking the person, are they interested in working? And then from there, completing the focus area. And on the employment focus area, if the person, there's a barrier section to say, what is the barrier of you not working? There is one that says, it's a choice chosen by me. Don't quote me if I'm wrong, but something like that in that nature, where it says a choice given by me, meaning the individual, the person that you're serving. And then the person can easily just say, I'm not just interested in working, I prefer doing personal support, or, these are my preferences. And if the person does want to work but don't know the tools of how to work, that's when we'll be there as a team to help them to be able to explore paid or volunteer job opportunities.
Thank you, Jane. Really appreciate that. I think, being an employment first state is really good to have the conversation in the when you're just doing the discovery section, so that you know what kind of supports to put in place. And Karen and Jennifer, I know you guys have been doing this for many, many years, and with the whole new flexibility of services, can you talk about how your agency have been grading, stacking the various employment services to support the person when they have expressed their interest in working, and how does you guys work with doors and other funding sources for employment?
So advance the slide, please. Thank you. So this is an example I'm gonna share with you and just kind of talk you through the whole thing. But first, I want to say what an incredible collaborator Jane has been with SEEK through this transition. The relationship with CCSs and providers is so critical in LTSS, and being able to get a quick response from Jane and have her work with us and work with the families and really understand what it is that we're working to accomplish has just been such a treat for us. So this is kind of from the planning perspective, from the 20,000 foot looking at it. It's a DSAT. It's an example of somebody who wants to work but is currently in discovery. You can see that we lay out the whole year. And I will tell you that in the beginning, when you start to create these hourly, how many hours do you want of something and for how long? So for example, here we said that the person will get CDS for 30 hours a week from July to December. But in the meantime, while they're getting that in October, November, and December, they're going to be getting discovery and job development, or July and August and September, they'll get the discovery, and then 3 months. When you begin this process in doing your services this way, you may want to give yourself a longer time period within these services, because you might not hit those marks. You can always go bill back, you can't bill forward. So I would suggest, this is where we've honed it down to at Seek. We know that when discovery is done well and it's economical, it takes us about a month to do discovery 1, it takes us about a month to do discovery 2, and about a month to do discovery 3. So that's how we've scheduled it out. You may want to give yourself a couple of months to do things as you learn, and then you can tweak it going forward. So, because you have to make the money work, right? If you have somebody in discovery for 12 months and you never do it, and you've got a staff that's been working on it, an employment consultant or employment specialist working on it for a long time, you're losing money. They need to produce at the level that allows you to make money. So as a business, you have to think very differently, because you're not getting paid on a daily basis for people if you're not doing the work. That's the milestone payment. And that's one of the really great things about milestone payments, is you can actually get a milestone payment and an hourly payment on the same day. So you can get your doors money to do job development with somebody when you're doing some discovery with them as well, because you can do that stacking that way. So can we go to the next slide, please? This is an example of a real live schedule, and it's a combination of a couple situations, but I brought it to my program directors and they agreed this is not an uncommon schedule. So you can see in here that prior to fee for service, imagine that what this would have looked like on the funding side is 4 days of CDS and 1 day of employment done. That's what it would have looked like. It would have all have been just broken down that way. So it's a little bit like when you go to a restaurant and get a traditional menu versus a la carte. It's clear to me that the infrastructure to do a traditional menu of service is got to be different than the tradition than the method of doing a la carte. That's why Jen and I keep talking about you have to really look at your infrastructure and changing how you're allocating resources. So most of our schedules are weekly, but we use them for a whole month. So we don't repeat making this schedule on a weekly basis with people. There might be a tweak because maybe they work on Tuesday next month or next week instead of Friday or something like that. But you can see here, just like Jen said, I think this is really important for years and years. And I think this is a really important message for CCSs. For years and years and years, we've been thinking about people and saying, okay, let's assume they need all services. When are the times that they don't need service? You know, we have to have scheduled alone time. Well, this is a different approach. This approach is saying a person has the life they want, they live the life they want. Let's now build what they do want. So you can see here, there's some CDS one-on-one, there's discovery. Discovery should never be done like in a month, right? Or like in a week, right? This week we're doing discovery for this person, because the staff have to do a lot of work to get ready for a good discovery activity. And people can't really necessarily maintain that. So if you've been trained in discovery, you know that it's not like this week we do discovery 1, next week we do discovery 2. It is very discrete. And it might be you're doing an observation on a 2-hour process, but the staff needs to set that up. They need to do a task analysis. They need to really do a review. So you don't put that all together. And then again, you see the other thing on the bottom there is we have some online activities. And I will tell you, at Seek, we have a very robust online schedule. We have people who, that's what they do. They create these online content and folks drop into them. We have volunteers. We have a very active volunteer coordinator who gets volunteers to come in and lead courses. We've got that culture club on there is actually the National Gallery. Somebody from the National Gallery comes in and leads an hour. You can go to the Seek website and look at our virtual class offerings to see all the things, because people drop in on this stuff all the time. So if you'll see through this also that staff, it may be that this person has 3 staff in their life, right? They've got 1 staff that does discovery, somebody who does the job coaching, and then maybe they have a staff person that helps them with the CDS one-on-one, and then they go to a class, and maybe that staff person goes there, but also supports other people when they're at that class. So it's very much a different way than showing up, doing one thing with one person all day and then leaving. It's very much directed around that person, and so it means a different infrastructure. I think you're getting now the words that we're talking about of how critical a different infrastructure is, because this is a very, very different looking schedule than I think people have seen in the past, but it finally meets what we've been talking about with person-centered plan and person-directed services. This really is it, and we have a lot to learn, and we're going to get better at it. So the next slide, please. This kind of this slide will lay out for you. It's a summary of the sample schedule I just showed you. It's kind of the base of a DSAT. So you'll see that this month there is the 9 hours a week of one-on-one CDS, and there's 8 hours a week of one-on-4 CDS. But when we did the DSAT, we knew that we needed to put some fat in there in case he lost his job, or if there was a change and they couldn't do discovery this week, or maybe discovery's on a different day. So you actually inflated a little bit to cover it so that you're not keep going back and getting a new plan. It's difficult to get new plans revised. So that's why having finance at the table is also really critical to discuss the cost for this program. We know what our hourly cost is for each service, and so we know exactly how many hours. I think Jen said it really well. In Penmar, they know that they can sell the service of CDS in 3-hour increments. And so we know that discovery, to make money on discovery, we need to get it done within 1 month. That's a great example of why finance has to be at the table and giving feedback on an ongoing basis with programs. So you just have to start somewhere. The good news is that PCPs are all throughout the course of the year. You don't have to do everybody at once. You get them coming up one at a time. You can start making these piloted changes in your organizations, one person at a time, and then start to recognize where you need to make your infrastructure stages. So we did prepare for this for a long time and make these changes. So don't wait until you enter LTSS to do this. Get working on it now. You can absolutely do the LTSS or the fee-for-service model under the PCIS2 model, but you can't do the opposite. So start early. Next slide.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Karen. I appreciate that. I didn't know if Jennifer wanted to add anything to the braided and stacking or any relationship with how you guys work with doors.
The only thing that I would add is we have learned through this process that, especially when you're having that employment conversation at the PCP meetings or the prep process, is that there's a lot of misunderstanding around employment. And so there may be a lot of people that say, no, I'm not interested at this time. So we're also trying to engage as part of our CDS and our day habilitation services, opportunities for people to really explore what employment is, what that can look like for them, answer questions, even around benefits and things like that. We're trying to develop a side-by-side series that DSPs can do with either small groups of people or individually. So we're pre-recording some material. We're using our new peer mentoring program to also support particularly transitioning youth and families to understand the importance of employment, how to engage in that process, and what they should expect as they're coming into services. The only thing that I'd add in terms of our partnership with Doors, certainly if somebody is eligible for Doors supports, we will look first to providing job development services through Doors. If we need additional job development services, then we make sure we're having these conversations again as part of the prep process early on, making sure if somebody has an employment goal, are they eligible for doors? Do they have an open doors case? What is that going to look like? And including them as part of the process. So are we going to get a certain units for doors, and then we'll have a certain unit backup in our DDA services for job development? We may do ongoing initial supports through doors with their fading plans, and then if we need more, we always are building in ongoing supports as part of the person's DDA plan. And then, of course, making sure that follow-along supports for anyone that's employed or could be employed in that year are always part of the plan.
Thank you, Jennifer. That is such wonderful and rich information that you share with us today. This is fantastic. And as far as employment support services and wraparound supports, Linda, do you want to lead us on the meaningful day?
Sure. So Meaningful Day services support people who are 18 years and older and no longer in high school. An individualized schedule is used to provide an estimate of times associated with service activities that reflect the person's preference and the PCP goals. The schedule is then used to determine the authorization of the hours and is not intended to dictate the actual provision of the service. So if you go in and use our guideline for service of authorization and provider billing documentation, it really does talk about how each unit is billed, and it gives you the description of the service, the documentation required, and you can utilize that to help build these schedules. And like Karen said, you want to give yourself a little bit of cushion in case somebody normally does CDS 3 days a week, but they got sick and didn't want to go into the community one of the days, so you ended up having to do another service. And that you build those flexibilities into your schedule as you're putting it into the DSA. Also make sure that you're looking at the guidelines for service authorization and the provider billing documentation, because that gives you a lot of detail on how these services can be braided together. Next slide, please. The Meaningful Day services can be provided in 15-minute units, such as CDS or Day Hab. We have a lot of individuals who have medical are medically compromised and cannot spend 6 hours in the community. Maybe they can only spend an hour, but with our new billing system in LTSS, you can bill for that service in the community as CDS, because you can bill for 4 15-minute units. The monthly payment for employment services and follow-along supports is also available. And then we have milestone payments for employment services and discovery milestones. As per the DDA guidance to support week-to-week flexibility under the traditional model for a participant's employment schedule, and the services needs for the Meaningful Day services, our Meaningful Day services can be requested and authorized by DDA up to the weekly limit set forth by DDA's Medicaid waiver programs. The subject to limitations noted on the following slides and in the Person-Centered Plan Development and Authorization Guidance posted on DDA's Person-Centered Planning page will also tell you what those limits are. Please note that individuals that are self-directed in our self-directed delivery model can only have a variety of Meaningful Day services that go to 40 hours a week. They cannot go over the 40-hour-a-week limit. Next slide, please.
Although the DDA may authorize up to the weekly limit for each meaningful day service requested under the traditional service delivery model, teams should review and discuss service needs, including taking into consideration the hours a participant is working, example, daytime, nighttime, weekend hours, and not necessarily request the maximum service units for each meaningful day service. Participants cannot receive, and a provider will not be paid for more than the limit for meaningful day services set forth in the DDA Medicaid waiver program application, a total of 40 hours per week for all authorized meaningful day services combined, regardless of provider. Neither a service provider nor a participant through a fiscal management services provider may submit a claim for payment to DDA for meaningful day services provided in excess of the weekly limit. Such a claim for payment will be denied. Next slide, please. Karen has showed you an enviable schedule of a blended service plan year, and this is just a more basic overview of a flexible schedule where somebody might receive 10 hours of community development services and 30 hours of employment in the first week of the month, and the next week they might receive 20 hours of community development and 20 hours of employment, but they cannot receive more than 40 hours in a week or 40 hours of employment services in a week. So while we can authorize those additional services, like Linda said, for the what if scenarios, like what if there's a snow day, what if the person isn't working that day unexpectedly, the providers can't bill for more than the 40 hours for each service. Next slide, please. And this is an example of someone with multiple meaningful day services in the detailed service authorization section of the PCP. Employment services, job development, employment services, ongoing supports, employment services, follow along, community development services, and day habilitation groups. Next slide, please. Remember that we want the PCP to be able to tell a story of the person's day in the life and should be reflected in the person's person-centered plan. As has been demonstrated earlier by our panelists, the PCP can include various meaningful day services to support the person's day in the life and flexible activity schedule, similar to the general population. Teams should explore the person's goals, preferences, and various ways they can spend their day. Are they doing activities the typical person their age engages in during the day? If not, what exploration or questions or choices have been presented to the person so that they can make informed decisions and choices on how they want to spend their day? Next slide, please.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It's really good information. I think we're now getting to some questions from our early adopters and our case manager. So Jane, can you share how you started the Meaningful Day conversation with the person and their team, and what supports you provided in the person-centered development?
Okay, sure, Patricia. Thank you very much. And I just wanted to say, before I answered your question to Karen, to say thank you very much for a wonderful compliment, but I think it's all a teamwork. The main idea here is all about the person, and regardless if we're CCSs or providers, we all have something in common, which is to make sure that the person that we serve has the best quality service. And just working with you guys have been my pleasure as well. So answer your question, Patricia, in regards to Meaningful Day, how I get the question started with the person. I usually would want to ask, my experience in the past would be, I'll ask the person, how do you like your usual day to look like? What are things that you enjoy doing on a daily basis? What are things that you find productive in your life? Like, for instance, if an individual is transitioning from high school into, again, adult services, because we tend to get those kind of cases a lot, you would first get an idea of what their day usually look like. What are some of the activities, the list of schedules, a list of activities that are in their schedule. And one case that was brought, the person was volunteering, working at a hotel, and their desire was they want to continue to volunteer there because eventually they want to have a paid job. So having to then ask us, a CCS, educate them, provide resources, and guide them to what services are meaningful day services that would lead into what their interest is, which with that scenario I just gave, the person would then probably request employment services, the discovery, or if they have already had the job, it could be ongoing follow along job support. Either category would fit into line. And if other days, if they work twice a week, they wanted to switch that into doing community-based activities, we're just going out with their peers as a group, then you can look into community development service as well. So just as the coordinator, being there to educate, lead, and support the person in whatever service that they're interested in wanting to explore.
Thank you, Jane. Really appreciate that. Jennifer, do you want to share your experience and how you've done all the grading and stacking and talking about meaningful day services?
Yes, so similar to how Karen showed you an example of braiding with employment supports and CDS, this next example is going to talk about somebody that may participate in a day program, but also wants to connect in their community and wants to do that through CDS. So could you go to the next slide? So when we're looking at services in that example, in the DSA, this would reflect a combination of day hab groups and then also CDS group, and in this example, CDS one-to-one as well. And so as we've talked about, you do have the ability to build in some level of flexibility because there'll be days that for whatever reason a CDS group might not happen, or somebody chooses not to do that and they prefer to participate in the activities of the day program. And so you want to make sure when you're putting the DSA together that that flexibility exists. So the overall DSA will look like it's more than 40 hours a week in terms of combination of meaningful day services. But when you're actually providing those on a weekly basis, you will only be able to do that at the cap of a combination of 40 hours. And so when you are actually doing your billing and documentation, you'll actually be able to flex between also large group and small group day habilitation. And again, that's why it's really important that your DSPs understand how to do that. And if you can pre-schedule that in a system so that they don't have to think about that level of detail, it makes it a lot easier. But we'll go into the schedule next so you can see what this looks like. Could you go to the next slide? Okay, so similar to how Karen identified the schedule for employment and CDS combinations, here's one for a person that has this combination of day habilitation and CDS. So you can see on Mondays and Thursdays and Fridays that really this might be similar to how somebody who is participating in day habilitation in PCIS2 that might look, right? They might have an individualized schedule, but they're coming and going basically from 9 to 3 in a day program. I have shown though kind of the differentiation of the kinds of things that they might be engaged in at the day program. So let's say they come and they arrive during the day and there's kind of more just a social hour, it's large group, you may, have a larger ratio between team members. and the people you're supporting. There may be a larger art class that somebody decides to participate in, and that's in their regular schedule. But then there might also be opportunities for smaller group. Maybe if people need a little bit more support, or the nature of specific activities are smaller. So let's say you have a small advocacy club and a person's participating in that, then you would bill for that smaller ratio. So again, you can see why systems to be able to capture that billing and documentation accurately is really important, because people would have to be DSPs clocking in and out of these services throughout the day. So this gives somebody a lot of flexibility as a person, but you have to meet that infrastructure for that flexibility. So then if you look at Tuesday's example, this is where, let's say somebody has a specific volunteer work that they're doing. Let's say they volunteer at Meals on Wheels. So they are able to utilize public transportation to get there, but they have, especially right now, this is new to them, they have a DSP that's actually meeting them and going with them on that public transportation to help them with travel training. They go to Meals on Wheels, they're doing their volunteer activity for part of the day, and then they're going to then meet a CDS group with, let's say, that same DSP and a few others at the swim center, where they're going to be able to do water aerobics. And then after water aerobics, they may join as a group to do an exploration activity. We do a lot with CQL's personal outcomes measure and their 3 E's. So we're always trying to help people explore and experience and educate them on new things. So we kind of build those into some of our CDS groups. So that's an example of that day. Where Wednesday.
That's great, Jennifer.
Yes.
What we're going to do is we're a little short on time. So what I want to do is be able to talk about our retirement, and then I'm not going to ask the questions for the following slides. Let's go through the slides, and then we can go back to your schedules. Would that work?
Oh, sure, that's fine.
Yeah. So I think that you know, if you want to finish this one up, that's fine, and then we'll go to the retirement, and then we'll just go straight to your 2 other slides.
Okay.
Okay. So go ahead, Jennifer.
Okay. So just for this one, just so people know that you are able to combine day program and CDS supports within the same day. Something you just need to be aware of is that CDS cannot start and end from your day facility, but it can start and end within the community. So as long as you're building that in, there might be some gaps in utilization during that time, but you can do those services on the same day. So you can go to the next one.
We know retirement is important to all of us, and it's an option for people age 65 and older per the Social Security Administration retirement age. People that are past working age who no longer wish to work can be supported to engage in retirement activities like attending a local and integrated senior center, participating in clubs, and volunteering. We have an array of services that a person in retirement can use to have a meaningful day and not just sit at home and be isolated from their community by using community integration flexible services like community development services, day habilitation, personal supports, assistive technology and services, and transportation. Next slide, please. Retirement is approved at the age of 65. Residential shared hours can be used for housemates who are retired and when they're reflected in their PCPs. An activity schedule can help to map out a day, as we have seen. We've seen some very busy and interesting schedules. Schedules should be flexible, person-centered, and meaningful for the participant. Next slide, please.
So I think what I'm going to do here, Jennifer, is can you walk us through your examples from your slides that you have? So Donna, can you bring us to the next slide so that Jennifer, you can tell us a little bit about how you guys do some of the retirement support services.
Yes, and you can actually go to the next slide because I can just talk from the schedule. So when someone's retired, they may not want to have a full day of service. And so here is an example of someone being able to spend the mornings. Let's say they live residentially in a group home. So they would be able to have, in lieu of day services within their group home for those hours. They may utilize shared or dedicated hours, but then they're able to participate in, let's say, if they're choosing 5 days of CDS group during the afternoons. So you can see here might be a schedule of something that people might do. So I know that we utilize our partnerships with our senior centers across our county to be able to help support people in participating in regular senior activities with other senior peers. Within that, we also do a lot around different kinds of fitness for seniors and activities that they enjoy. So this was just an example of how you really can match the two and make it more person-centered so that somebody isn't necessarily fully retired and only based out of their homes during the week, but they also can participate in CDS supports.
Thank you, Jennifer. This is phenomenal. You know, Karen, Jane, and Jennifer have been fantastic. It's 1:26. This is scheduled to 1:30. We can read some questions. I know we're having a conclusion of this March 4th. We were thinking to open it up with some FAQs. Rhonda, how would you like to address this? Because we got about 3 more minutes.
Yeah, I thought, Patricia, we'll ask a couple questions, and again, we can look at the questions and do some FAQs for that. So first question, Karen, what if a person loses their job and needs to return to day service full time? Is that built in some of the schedules you were talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we know ahead of time if somebody's getting, if they need more support. We also will always build in some ongoing support as well as follow along, so that if they're iffy on their job and they're not doing well, they need some intense support, we've got the flexibility to put some hours in there. So we don't just do the follow along, we also do some ongoing if there's like a crisis situation, or we know March is a really bad month for somebody. And if they lose their position and they go back into the job development process, then we would go get some more job development money. That's one of those things that we would get more of because we wouldn't necessarily have that in there. But the CDS flexibility or base is in there. So it's not a huge safety net for employment, but we generally know how people are doing on their jobs as we go into their annual review.
Great. Karen, another question is, based on what you're talking about, what have your challenges been with DSPs, staff signing people in and out of services throughout the day in real time?
Yeah, it's a great question. So as I said, we use ICM, and I think Jen can address this as well with her organization. We have a drop down in ICM so that the goal in the activity match the service, and the DSPs complete the attendance on a daily basis, because if we wait too long, they forget because they're working in 15-minute units. The frontline supervisor approves it on a weekly basis. So by making sure that we have a system in place for the frontline supervisors to approve it on a weekly basis, and then the program director or their designee approve it on a monthly basis, we never get too far behind. So if somebody doesn't have it right, we might have to go in and tweak it and then go back and do some retraining. Hey, when you're doing this activity, it's actually one on 4 or 1-on-1, whatever. So we look at it at least on a weekly basis and approve it. There's levels of approval. And I think that there's been some good work with Jen and her team also on that very same thing and how they're using their online system, the Twinsa system, to be able to make it easier for DSPs to know which service they're doing, which goal they're working on, and what time of day they're doing that service.
Great, thank you. And then one last kind of comment clarification that we got from another CCS to share with everybody before we close out for today. And it notes that Karen clarified a little bit, but it should be stressed that planning is an ongoing process. The annual update should formally begin 90 business days out whenever possible. The best practice for meeting date ranges is 80 to 45 days, with 60 days out being most common, as Jane mentioned. And submission is based on business days, so 20, not calendar days. All required supporting documents, such as the DSAT, the service implementation plan and such, needs to be provided to the CCS within the noted timeframes in order to support a timely plan submission. So thank you, Rashawn, for sharing that. And again, emphasizing that really importance of person-centered planning and coordination. So Patricia, I'm going to turn it back over to you to close out, and we hope that everybody can join us next week.
Yeah, thank you everyone so much. We apologize for those who join us a little bit right under the hour. We're hoping to do a webcast next time so that most people can enter our webinar. So thank you so much and have a great day.